A very warm welcome to the third day Africa FinTech Summit closing session. And this is a special part of our summit, a live fireside chat with Dorsey. Jack, welcome to the Africa FinTech Summit, and thank you ever so much for gracing our summit and availing yourself for this fireside chat. Jack doesn't need any introduction. He is known for his fintech and futuristic tech innovations. We also know him for his COVID-19 fight by taking $1 billion equity out of the Square and using it for COVID fight. But from the Africa FinTech point of view, we also know him from his listening tour to Africa last year, where Yele met him in Nigeria and I met him in Ethiopia. And at the end of his trip, he made a bold statement where Africa is the future, especially from the Bitcoin point of view. And then that is what we'll be focusing this fireside chat. And Yele will be moderating the panel. Yele is one of the most active crypto investors in the continent, based in Lagos. So I'll hand over to Yele. So Yele and Jack, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Zacharias. Jack, it's good to see you again, and looking forward to a very exciting conversation.
Nice to see you.
I'm gonna begin. So last year, I had the pleasure of meeting you at an intimate sort of Bitcoin meetup in Lagos, and you had your listening tour in Africa. You visited Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and Ethiopia, and met several tech leaders and innovators. At the end of the trip, you said that the continent would define the future. Something that stood out for me was that you spent a lot of time listening, and it was clear you were observing, more than talking. What did you learn from that trip, and how did they help form your view of Africa's role in the future?
Well, so I spent all of November going to various countries on the continent. I went to Nigeria, obviously, Ghana, Ethiopia, South Africa, and the intention was simply to learn as much as I could. I made no plans to meet with media or the government. I was focusing my energy on entrepreneurs and students, from high schoolers to college kids. And the goal was, as you said, just to listen. And what I was incredibly amazed by and also inspired by was just the level of focus specifically on Bitcoin. But broader than that, it was the desire to solve really tangible problems in a super creative way. So I just felt like this amazing energy of entrepreneurship and people doing whatever it took to make it work, and solving really big problems. Square deals a lot with just moving money around, whether it's transacting from one party to another party or through lending or various financial services like payroll benefits and whatnot. And just the the focus on the foundational work of payments and how much that enables so much on top of it was something I learned in every single conversation I had in every country that I had. So the energy was incredible, the focus was incredible, the foundational aspect of what was being built and required in order to build on top of that and build on top of that was awesome to see that early. And just the speed and the speed and just the creativeness that was being employed, I thought was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I think the African FinTech Summit organizers are super grateful that you personally sponsored 250 students from across Africa to attend this summit free of charge. Some of these students you actually met whilst you were in Africa, and they were obviously inspired just hearing you speak. You talked about Square and kind of what Square does. As an entrepreneur in the early days of Square and your journey as a founder, what advice would you give to young innovators on the continent and across the world trying to start or work on a particular startup or venture?
I think the greatest skill that we can build and that served me the best is being able to understand how to solve problems better. Because when you think about it, any organization, any government, any company really exists only for one purpose, which is to solve a problem, and solve a problem in a more creative way than its competitors, which is why the solution it creates might be picked instead of various competitors. And again, this goes to companies, it goes to organizations like nonprofits, movements, governments as well. So how do we build that skill of problem solving? There's, one of the ways I built it is learning how to program. Learning how to program was not, for me, a goal. I didn't want to be an engineer. I didn't necessarily want to build, massive systems. I wanted to build something that I could demonstrate to someone else so that they could see and potentially feel the idea I was trying to express. And what I learned about programming about 3 or 4 years in is it wasn't about me becoming an engineer at all. It was about helping me to learn how to solve problems. It helped me learn how to break problems down into smaller parts. It helped me learn how to create a hypothesis and then test it via experimentation. Like I would, try this line of code and then I would try this and that didn't work and try this. So basic stuff, but the beauty of programming was that it also has this velocity, this speed that allows one to see the results of their work very quickly, and more importantly, show the results of their work to someone else very quickly. So I think it's really important that you find some method of learning how to solve problems better. Programming was the one that worked for me, but there are certainly other ones. And then it's really just like getting deeper into the question that you're trying to ask as you solve a problem. Like when we started Square, we originally thought we were building a credit card reader. We were building a credit card reader for someone's phone. They could take a credit card from their customer, they could swipe it, it would go through the phone, it'd go up to Visa and MasterCard, and the card was charged and they would make money. But we learned in watching sellers use it that the sellers that were using our credit card reader didn't want a credit card reader. They wanted to make the sale. They wanted to be able to accept the form of payment that their customer was using. It wasn't about the credit card at all. It wasn't about the reader. It was about simply making the sale. And if you solve the problem of making the credit card reader, it's a very small company and a very not so valuable solution. But if you solve the problem of helping a seller make a sale, suddenly the universe of solutions expands greatly. So we went from just making a credit card reader to help someone make a sale to building a point of sale to help organize their business so they could see their business better and make better decisions to help them make more sales. Square Capital, which is our lending arm, to lend them money so they could buy a new piece of equipment that would double their sales, or buy new marketing, or hire a new employee, or get a new location to make more sales. So suddenly we became a much more valuable company because we asked a bigger and deeper question than what we started with. Our start was people need credit card readers because they need to accept credit cards, but that was actually the wrong solution. People needed to make a sale. The credit card reader was just one solution to that problem.
Yeah, I really like that. As an entrepreneur myself, like the idea of fine-tuning that question into something that is a much deeper and meaningful problem for the customer actually can allow you build a more valuable business. And it's really interesting to see you talk about this idea of transitioning from thinking about, oh, I want to build the best credit card reader, into actually saying, how do I help, an individual or business make a sale? And then it becomes a much broader problem. So thanks very much for that framing. Still keeping the conversation on Square. Whilst doing research, I found some interesting data points, and I'd like to share with you. So one is that according to the GSMA report in 2019, 1.7 billion people globally are financially excluded. And in Africa, the unbanked population as of 2018 is 66%. And as crazy as that figure seems, in the US, 10 years ago, when you were co-founding Square, that number was actually 40%. Do you see any similarities between kind of the US 10, 20 years ago and Africa? And what role do you think Square has played in driving financial inclusion and wealth creation for individuals and small businesses? And are there any insights that you can share with entrepreneurs on the ground in Africa that they might learn a thing or two from?
I think there's similarities, but I think more importantly, there's differences that countries and entrepreneurs in Africa can take advantage of. The number one being is there aren't a lot of entrenched players yet in Africa. Certainly there are some, but it feels like the entrenchment is more of a form of government regulation and that not being necessarily the most inspiring regulation to help companies build and to grow. But what we had to deal with in the US was a lot of entrenched banks and networks who weren't incentivized to help a company that's just getting started. And we had to go above and beyond in helping them understand why, and we learned in the process as well, but helping them understand why something like Square would help them. Like our goal was to increase access to the credit card network ultimately. Like if we were successful, we were enabling more and more people to accept credit cards in the first place and therefore to use credit cards. So it would enrich their networks even more and increase the usage of those networks. So if we just came to them with like, hey, we're the new disruptive Silicon Valley company and we're going to destroy your business and, all the bravado and all the arrogance that you might expect from a newer startup. We want to get where we were, where we've been able to get to, because we recognize not only problem that our customers were having, our would-be customers, sellers, but the problem in fixing that would also solve another problem for the biggest players out there, Visa, MasterCard, and the banks, in that we could reach a size of seller that they were not able to reach before. They didn't build a system to do so. They couldn't afford to do so, whatever it was. So our purpose was suddenly aligned and our incentives, more importantly, were aligned. So I guess the biggest thing is like to look for opportunities to align those incentives with what you might assume to be adversarial entities, whether that be competitors or the banks or the government. And how do you align those incentives so that you can clearly show that everyone will benefit from this over time? And if the government is there to look out for the people, and Bitcoin provides a way to help the people, the goal is to show that path and to show that not supporting it would be against the function or the proposed function of the government. So I think there's a lot of the differences I think are important to consider, and I do think there are some advantages and certainly some gaps that you have to build. But again, like visiting the continent, feeling the energy, feeling the focus, that's just work. It's more of a function of like, are we prioritizing the right things at the right time?
Yeah. My key takeaway from what you said is the idea of thinking about how can you align incentives between, entities or organizations that you might think of as adversarial. But if you can figure out that incentive alignment, then, you can potentially work together and sort of, achieve scale or even more success. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so this is probably my kind of my favorite question that I'm gonna ask today. Like, I think it's very clear that you're a huge fan of Bitcoin. So I'm very curious, and I've not read or seen this anywhere. What's your Bitcoin story, Jack? When did you hear about Bitcoin? When did you buy Bitcoin? And what makes you excited about Bitcoin?
Everything makes me excited about it. But I don't think there was just one moment for me, because I kind of grew up on the Usenet bulletin boards on the internet. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. We had one BBS that happened to be connected to this university called WashU, which had part of the backbone of the early internet, and I was able to explore Usenet and IRC, and one of my favorite Usenet groups was alt.cypherpunks. And in cypherpunks, there was a lot of discussion around cryptocurrency, and more cryptography and how it might be used to trade value. And this was, 30 years ago, at least 35 years ago. So I was fascinated by the concept. I was fascinated by cryptography and how it might be used for everyday things, like how we trade value, what our money is built on. And there were a lot of ideas being traded around from the cryptographers on that board, in that Usenet group, but nothing that endured as itself. A lot of the ideas probably expressed in those various offshoots probably contributed to what Bitcoin is. So I've always been interested in it. And when the white paper came out, I was like, wow, this is it. And not just because this is a culmination of a lot of what I've been interested in and what we were talking about and what was promised, but it was, the whole thing was just poetry. It was a very short, straightforward, simple white paper. It was principled. It was direct. It was pseudonymous. Like, everything about it, I loved. I loved that we didn't know who created it. That it felt like it was a collaboration around the world, but it was, more importantly, born on the internet and wanting to be developed on the internet. So, if the internet were to have a currency, this felt like a really good start to the answer. And as I paid attention to it, I watched it, and the community that came around it was just as principled and just as curious and just as interesting and weird as everything I found in alt cypherpunks. It was a weird community, and it was a principled community, and it was a really cool community. So all that energy seemed to transfer into this white paper, which then transferred into a new community that made this real. And I don't know when I first ran a node, or when I first bought or traded. It was early. I don't know the amounts, but I continued to pay attention to it until we started Square in 2009. And in 2014 we added the ability for sellers to accept Bitcoin. Didn't see a lot of usage, but when we added it into Cash App, that's when we really got it right, and had something that could contribute to the community, but also we could learn a lot from. And I think we've done both.
That's really awesome. So, how far back your interest in sort of cryptography sort of predates even the launch of Bitcoin. Another sort of you've made kind of a number of statements around cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and I wanted to highlight a couple of them so that you could, I guess, explain or expatiate on those points. So one of them was you described cryptocurrency as an instrument of economic empowerment. You also said that crypto is a direct activism against an unverifiable and exclusionary financial system that negatively affects a lot of our society. Would love to kind of like hear, you expand on that, especially because, I was speaking to a couple of people the other day, and I said something about the financial system today is it's very dependent on, our geography. If you're in the US, you have access to the US dollar, and, it's the best sort of fiat currency that you have. If you're in Africa, whether it's Nigeria, Ghana, or Ethiopia, you're exposed to inflation. You don't have access to, quality financial services. So we'd love to kind of hear you talk a little bit more about, the philosophical side of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
I hate to say this, but all your audio was like chopped up, so I only heard the first part of your question. It was about economic empowerment in Bitcoin.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to start reading your lips because it's all like clicky. I don't know if anyone else is having this experience or if you can hear me. But I mean, in terms of like Bitcoin being aligned with economic empowerment, I think if I think about Square, Square could not be built as an internet company. Like when you build an internet company, you create a website or you create an app, and ideally the whole world can use it like day one. They can just come to it if they hear about it. They can use it. In the case of Square, we had to go country by country. In each country, we had to find a bank to partner with. We had to pay attention to the local government regulation, and it became very, very challenging for us to even expand outside of the United States. It took us 9 months just to launch in the US because of everything that we had to go through. So if the internet were to have a currency, then we could start Square, and Square could act more like an internet company, in that we could just launch something and then it could all work right away everywhere in the world. So it helps our business, but also it gives, now I can hear you humming, so it's not clicking anymore. It gives the people easier access to the network, and more and more people get at least the opportunity to access it, which is important. But for us as a company, it allows us to move so much more faster, allows us to be a global company faster instead of this country by country thing that we have to do. And that's important. And I think it's also important that we recognize this is an open source community. This is not controlled by any one person, entity, or company or government. It's not being led by any one entity or person or government. It can't be stopped by any one person or government. And we need to give back to it too. We can't just take from it. We have to give back to it. So we created a small team called Square Crypto, which gives back by just working on open source projects within Bitcoin. We opened up our patents to the community so that hopefully other companies that have patents around the Bitcoin space or the crypto space are all putting this in a pool so we can defend independent developers from corporations that would try to take advantage through patent law. And then we invested our own money in Bitcoin, not seeing as just purely as an investment or currency deflation, but actually seeing this as an investment in the community, and a good investment in the community. So all these things add up to our purpose of economic empowerment, increasing access for people, enabling us to move faster as a company and as a business so that we can serve more people faster. I don't know if that was your question, but I just heard economic empowerment in Bitcoin, so I just took it took it that direction.
I think I answered the question. Hopefully, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what do you think are the biggest challenges or barriers to mass adoption of Bitcoin in Africa and globally?
I think it's actually a design problem at this point. I mean, there's a lot of people solving the speed and the efficiency issues and privacy and security. Accessibility is something we're working on with Cash App, for instance. But I think that there hasn't been a lot of designers who've really gotten in there and looked at the end-to-end what it is and the end-to-end flow, and really made it simple for everyday people and made it accessible for people. I think Bitcoin has an incredible brand. I think it's the most resilient out of all of them out there. And I think it wants more designers to make it feel straightforward and simple, and make it feel easy and make it feel cool, and make it feel like a real product, like make it feel tangible, like paper cash feels tangible. And I think that's lacking. Obviously, there are some obvious there's some egregious places like key management, for instance. But just some of the basics too need to be really thought through and designed, and done so in a way that anyone of any age in any country can understand immediately what this thing is, what it's for, and how to use it. I think that goes far away.
Yeah, I think definitely I agree with you. The point of the designers. So you talked about this earlier. Square started supporting Bitcoin transactions in 2014, and you added Cash App. Also, you added Bitcoin trading to Cash App in 2018. And these were sort of very early moves for a company of that size. Cash App generated about $32 million in Bitcoin gross profits in Q3 of 2020, almost 15 times increase year over year. Was this in line with your expectations when you started in 2014? And how do you feel about the growth that you've seen within the Square ecosystem?
To be honest, we really didn't have any expectations. We thought this was cool. We wanted to learn from it. Like, a lot of what we try to do is like, is this step we're going to take something that we're going to learn from or not? And Bitcoin was obviously something we're going to learn from, because this is digital currency. I mean, where else is that? What other opportunity do we have to learn from something like that? So we knew that we were going to learn, and it was going to be hard, and it was going to be uncomfortable. 2014 wasn't, but 2018 with Cash App, we were a public company. We had to talk to the SEC about Bitcoin and what it was. So we had a lot of firsts in front of us, and we had a lot to lose too. So it was a risky move, but one that paid off, because we did it from a desire to learn, but also a desire to give more people access to this thing that was getting more and more attention and more mainstream attention, and people wanted to participate in, but it still was a little bit too complicated. So it blew away all of our expectations, because we had none. We just expected to learn, and we did.
Okay, awesome. Also related to Square and Bitcoin, this year alone, Square invested about $50 million into Bitcoin in its balance sheet. What was the reason behind this? And do you expect to see more corporates investing or holding digital assets like Bitcoin in the future?
Well, I mean, a company and organization can only do so many things, and investing some of its balance sheet might be the one thing that it can do. But there are other things that I think are more impactful. I think there's a big conversation about companies investing in their balance sheet in Bitcoin right now, and I think it's great. But higher impact is paying an open source developer to work on Bitcoin. Higher impact is giving patents up to defend the community, so that independent developers don't have to worry about getting into a bunch of patent litigation from large companies. Higher impact is, writing white papers and giving new work to the community to grow. So there's a number of things that can help the Bitcoin community and Bitcoin, the project. I think investing, obviously puts some skin in the game, but if you could only do one thing, I wouldn't necessarily do that first. I would focus on how do we actually make this better through development, through lending our resources, and I think I do think we'll see more of that. I do think we'll see a lot of that, and that excites me. We're seeing more and more companies hire open source developers that aren't doing anything the company is focused on, but instead focused entirely on what Bitcoin needs and what it wants, and that's as it should be, like across open source, not just Bitcoin, across open source. So I do hope we see more of that, but I think we will.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what Square Crypto is about. It's one of the few organizations, and I think the entire Bitcoin and crypto community was really excited to see that. And I definitely do hope that more companies do that. Open source is critical, and hopefully you've created a model that other companies and corporates with those resources can follow to kind of grow the usability and utility of Bitcoin globally. So I have just one final question. The fireside chat is called Decentralized Finance. And for those in the audience that might not be familiar, Decentralized Finance, or DeFi, aims to replicate the open source and permissionless nature of payments as seen with Bitcoin across other financial services like borrowing, lending, and credits. Would love to hear your thoughts on DeFi, and if you think it's underhyped or overhyped.
It's probably both underhyped and overhyped, to be honest. I mean, all these things tend to be, and including Bitcoin itself, and that's not a negative thing, but like, let's pay attention to what matters. Is there an opportunity to reinvent a bunch of financial services and financial systems? 100%. But we need to make sure that we're actually going back to, we're not starting with technology, and we're not starting with the solution or running to it with a particular solution. We're starting with expressing and articulating what the problem is. What is the problem, and why do blockchain or Bitcoin or crypto technologies solve that problem better than what existed before? That's the fundamental question. And if a decentralized infrastructure helps solve the problem of payroll better or lending better, which I believe it does, awesome. That's where the conversation should be, and that's what we should focus on. But I think in the overhyping, yes, we are bombarded with how this is going to solve all the problems, but we don't actually see the solutions just yet, because we're not talking enough about the problem and like how we solve it in a much more creative way. And in terms of the underhyping, you can feel that this is going to be massively impactful and it's going to change everything. But let's just not get ahead of ourselves by approaching every single problem with the same solution. Like useful spending some time on the problem, articulating that, and then like understanding how this technology might solve it in a better way than what exists today or what came before.
Yeah. Focus on the problem, not on the technology or the solution. I think that if that becomes the mantra of the Bitcoin and crypto community, I think we would see tremendous progress.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's the community, and then there's an orbit around that community. There's another orbit around that community, another orbit around that community. So it's a function of like, what part of the universe you're in, where I think things get either overhyped or underhyped. But go back to the core, and look at the use cases and the problems, and there's a bunch of creative solutions around it that these technologies present us.
Yeah, awesome. I think those are all of my questions, Jack. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation and asking questions that were top of mind around DeFi, around Bitcoin, Square, and it's really inspiring to see the work that you do every day. And thanks very much for agreeing to have this conversation with us and the audience at the Africa FinTech Summit.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the time, and I appreciate your work, and I can't wait to get back on the continent. Hopefully sometime next year. I'll spend some meaningful time there, like months. So excited for it.
Nice. I wasn't sure if that was still on the card, but I think that's global news, and can't wait for you to visit. The community has definitely grown a lot since your last visit. There are more companies, more entrepreneurs, more developers, and more progress in Bitcoin and fintech. So excited to have you back when you do visit again. Thanks very much.
Can't wait. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Am I broadcasting? You all done?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Yeah, ELA and Jack, thank you very much for a really thought-provoking discussion. It's been a thrill to have you guys involved in the Africa FinTech Summit this year. Hi, everyone. Am I broadcasting? You all done?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm having some audio problems. Forgive me. Hopefully this is working, but I think if you came into this discussion today with any skepticism about crypto, you've just been kind of offered some very compelling evidence as to how and why crypto and decentralized finance can be a tool of financial empowerment and inclusion, and why Africa is uniquely positioned to really drive this technology, and why Africa is just an exciting place to be in terms of fintech and entrepreneurship writ large. I want to especially thank Jack for sponsoring tickets. I know a lot of the African fintech startups and students that are in our audience and have been very active and engaged are here because he bought tickets for them. And it's just been wonderful having you involved in this. So allow me to put a bow on this, our 5th African FinTech Summit. We're a small team that puts this together. And there's always this moment, usually the day before, the night before we kick off the event, where we're all a bit stressed and tired, and we look at each other and wonder why we do this to ourselves. But this moment right here is the answer to that. It's been an incredibly enlightening last 3 days of discussions across a broad range of topics. But I think in aggregate, the discussions really underscore and prove the thesis of this initiative, which is fintech is not a hype cycle. It is a globally attractive and sustainable asset class, and it's a powerful instrument to solve Africa-specific challenges and to drive African-specific successes and growth and wealth and economic inclusion and empowerment. So on that note, I would like to take 1 minute to thank the people who worked tirelessly to make this possible. Zacharias Amsalu, Ashley Smith, Andrew Barden. Thank you all very much. You make this happen, along with all of our speakers, moderators, our team of volunteers who have been incredibly helpful and gracious, and to all of you for attending and engaging and asking questions. So on that note, I'll adjourn the 5th Africa FinTech Summit. I'll invite you all to pour a cup of coffee or a glass of something else, depending on what time zone you're in, and move over into the network session on the platform, and hope to see you over there. So I hereby adjourn the Africa FinTech Summit. Thank you all very much.